You're listening to Unfiltered, real talk about sex and love with Ashley
and Heather. And today we're talking about questions that involve the way that pornography destroys people's marriage. And so we got several questions on this, and it really is something that a lot of people are curious about, and especially when there's other research that says that, couples are okay with using pornography as part of their relationship, but it really does a lot of damage to the relationship, and that's more of what we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm. Porn is destroying marriages, and I appreciate that whether you are more conservative or more liberal, or regardless of your politics or theology, that the conversation is happening more and more that pornography is very damaging, very harmful. It feeds the demand for sex trafficking and organizations like the National Center of Sexual Exploitation. I feel like it's becoming more of a conversation where we can have mutual ground regardless of what background we have or what our viewpoint is. And to me, that feels like a good opportunity for us as believers, especially us here who have had healing or recovery from sexual struggles or betrayal in a way where we can pass that on and be a safe place for people to have conversations and be able to talk about this in a way that's not shaming and divisive, but that this is something that a lot of people can get behind talking about and wanting to make a difference in. And so I just see this as an opportunity for the church to be able to be that safe place for people to come. Okay, so the first question is, why does my spouse's porn use and inappropriate sexual behavior feel so personal, even though it's not? Understanding this has been one of the hardest parts of my journey. Yeah, and Heather and I have been, we talked about this because sometimes you hear, oh, the sex addiction's not about you. And even, we may have even been guilty of saying that early on. And that's not what we mean by that. We mean that you didn't cause it. Right. That there's nothing you can do or not do to control whether they're going to act out or not, because they are fully responsible for that. And so early in my marriage, in our recovery and healing process, people would say, oh, well, it has nothing to do with you, or it's not about you. And that I found really offensive because it was ruining my life. It was impacting my children. It was impacting my marriage. It made me feel ugly. It made me feel worthless. And so it was about me in my mind. And so a better phrase for that is that it's not caused by you and you didn't do it. And it's okay for you to take it personally. I mean, it really is, because, it says, why does it feel so personal, even though it's not? It's personal because it impacts you, but you didn't cause it. And so I think education is one of the best ways that helped me of being able to understand the addict brain. And that's why we put that in Betrayal and Beyond, not to make excuses, but to help the betrayed spouse understand how an addict's brain is hijacked and why they're doing what they're doing, the compulsive behaviors, the compulsive acting out. But it takes time to heal from the pain that causes. And so, one, if they're still acting out, or they haven't owned it, or they haven't apologized, they haven't shown that they're trying to change, it could be really hard to move past feeling hurt by that. If they are starting to change or show remorse, apologize for what they've done, and you're willing to go to a group or counseling, then you can start to unpack that a little bit and deal with it. And it's not that it won't still be hurtful. Like when I look back on things, I feel hurt. But when I read my journals from 10 years ago versus how I feel today, I sometimes can't even believe that's the same person. There's just so much anger and pain coming out of me that it seems like a totally different person back there. So the more that you process that pain, the more you put in healthy boundaries, the more that you feel like you have a healthy sense of control of what's happening in your life, regardless of what they're doing. I think that the feelings of being overwhelmed with that pain or hurt can start to neutralize a little bit.
Yeah, because we tell a lot of partners that, that their spouse who's struggling, that more often than not, they brought this into the relationship. This was something that they struggled with long before they ever even met you, sometimes for several years beforehand. And yet at the same time, I know as a woman and as a wife that for somebody to say, if I'm the only person that my husband is supposed to be having sex with, and yet he's, using pornography and masturbating and seeking sex elsewhere, that's going to feel personal. It is, no matter how you phrase it. And so, but it really does come from being able, like you said, to give yourself time to work through that, and to recognize that even though the feelings are still probably going to be there for some times, the more that you can have knowledge behind your feelings, or knowledge that's going to help to shape how you feel about something, that's going to be helpful. Because I know sometimes when discovery happens or disclosure happens and you're just caught in the middle of this cyclone that you never even anticipated could be part of your world, that it's probably one of the primary feelings for most women who recognize that, okay, this is destroying my marriage, this is destroying me. How is it not about me to some extent?
Right. And, when you find out that your husband is seeking something else that's not you, then your thought is, I'm not good enough. Like, there's something about me that couldn't keep him satisfied. He needs something else. And then if what he seeks is completely different than you, if he's seeking after men, or he's seeking after something, something else that's totally opposite of you, then you're wondering how and why. And so being able to understand even how a person who compulsively acts out, their arousal template can be developed, or what they're seeking can start to change, that all needs to be rewired, that all needs to be recalibrated, because that's probably a progression that happened that led them to a place where they didn't start out there. And so even taking sex off the table, like we've talked about before, and getting the right counseling and going into group, so that person, their husband, can start to rewire what's arousing to them, like reconnect with their wife and have that be what is attractive to them, rather than whatever they've trained their brain to be aroused by.
Right. And then also just remember that that when you're giving yourself time to heal from this and figure out what you're feeling and why you're feeling it, that all of it is okay, and just have an extra measure of grace for yourself, because this is not on a schedule.
Right.
You get to take as much time as you need to heal from this and the impact that it has on you. So, because I think a lot of women think that there's some kind of a clock ticking, that I have to be over this at a certain time frame, and there's no rule around it. Take as much time as they need.
Right. Or they're getting pressure from their spouse that they should be over it.
Right.
And they don't get to be over it that fast.
Yeah. So our second question says, my husband has what I'll call a porn addiction induced inability to orgasm. What I would like to know is this fixable? He is in a Pure Desire group right now and just started 7 pillars. If it is fixable, what do we need to do? How do we fix it? And I think that one of my questions for this person would be, in your relationship, has there been a time when he could achieve orgasm? And is it because of more pornography or something else that has changed for him physiologically that is contributing to kind of this sexual anorexia or this inability to orgasm? So that would be one of my first questions. And then when we talk about, is it fixable? Yes, absolutely. It's fixable. It typically is one of those things where for most couples, you have to take sex off the table, because it gives both people an opportunity to kind of reset your brain. And especially for the person who's struggling, that it allows them to like take away all the pornography, all the other stimuli, everything else that they were being aroused by, so that their dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine can all go back to these normal levels, and which is really uncomfortable for most people who struggle. I'm just telling you that up front, that it's going to take some time, but it is one of the things that then once those levels hit baseline again, it's a great opportunity for them to start rebuilding healthy habits around sex and what that looks like for you guys, so that then he can achieve orgasm. I would like to say that taking sex off the table is usually very effective for couples for about 90 days. That seems to be a very standard time frame, even within a clinical setting. But it's also just recognizing that if you guys as a couple need more time than that, then take more time than that.
Yeah.
And we also recommend that when something happens like this, it might be good to go to the doctor, because you just never know if there's been some change in testosterone levels or other things that could be inhibiting his ability to achieve orgasm. And so if it seems like other things are not working or other things seem more difficult, then going to see a doctor can be super helpful.
Yeah. And I mean, I like that you took a moment to explain just recalibrating, and getting all those hormone levels back to normal, because I mean, it makes sense. Like if you're flooding and flooding and flooding your brain, and that example is used on the Conquer series, where it's like, if you're eating Snickers bars, then a strawberry is not going to taste sweet. And if we artificially just pump our brain full of instant gratification, sex, and high dopamine levels from pornography, then something that was intended to be pleasurable and arousing, like your spouse, that can't compete, because it's like you've flooded your brain with multiple images versus this one spouse. And so this real person. And so taking the time to go back, and we've had the same question on the reverse side of women feeling like they can't orgasm. And we say, take out the easy things first of, are you looking at pornography? Are you using toys? Are your hormone levels okay? Do you need pelvic floor therapy? I mean, we take those things out and then work on that mental healing and that mental process. And it will likely come back. I mean, we have had this be a question many times, and I would say, I don't think it's ever not gotten better when people have done the work. But like you said, make sure you go see a doctor too.
And because even just sometimes the mental blocks can be huge inhibitors.
Yeah.
And so that's an important thing to take care of too. If you need counseling about something, even past trauma that could be, contributing as well. It's just make sure that you're checking all the boxes, and doing all the things and remembering that in this case, it might not just be about the act of sex, but there might be more going on there.
Yeah.
So our third question says, my husband recently told me he's not physically attracted to me anymore, even though he loves me dearly, and I have no idea how to process or move on from this. I just had our second baby and was already feeling insecure about the way my body has changed. He's about 6 years into his recovery from porn addiction. He's a wonderful and caring husband in most other areas. I don't know how to be around him, much less have sex with him. I can't relax in my own skin, in my own home, with the person who is supposed to be my safest place. I just think that this is so sad, and I'm so sorry that you're in this situation, and that it's impacting you this way. My heart breaks. It is one of those things that I totally can empathize with her, and feeling like I just had a baby, and my body is out of shape now and I feel uncomfortable. And yet there's this part of me that feels like it shouldn't matter. Somebody who says that they love you, they need to love all of you. And it's not like, and in this situation, it appears that it's not because she's letting herself go or anything like that. You just made a person, and that is, and of course your body is going to be not in the same shape as it was. And so I think, and this might be a situation where counseling up front might be more helpful than a group, just because the counseling is going to help deal with how she's feeling for sure. But it also, I typically would recommend that if she was going to go with her husband to counseling, that they do separate counseling at first and then do together counseling, just in case there are other things that are not being expressed that are adding into the equation and what's going on, because there could be a lot more going on here, especially with him, that isn't being explained. So that would be probably my first recommendation would be personal counseling.
Yeah. I was thinking of that too. Because somebody can be a wonderful dad and a caring husband. I've got one of those, but also last January, John lost sexual interest in me, and I'm like, what is going on? It made me feel extremely insecure. And I think your recommendation is spot on. Somebody needs to get in there and start doing some digging to figure out why, if there's been a sudden change, because it could be so many things. It could just be like lack of desire altogether. It could be hormone levels are off. It could be they've got some kind of mental block. It could be they need to put their mind in a different mindset. They need to do some work, some marriage work. They need to lean into this, because the alternative is just having this be your life for the rest of your life, which sounds sad and very sad. And so I would I would highly recommend counseling too, because it is different than a group where we need to figure out the specifics of what's going on, not just, because having somebody say that they're not attracted to you or they've been relapsing on porn, especially after you've had a baby, is devastating. And that happens to a lot of us because, one, we get really big, we get uncomfortable, some of us go on bed rest, and then you have this 6 to 8 week postpartum period where you can't, sexually, have sexual intercourse. And that's sad for somebody to have to go through the emotional and physical stress of having a baby. And then on top of that, worry that they're not going to be able to keep their husband from acting out because they're not available. That's so much pressure. And I just want to call the husbands who are listening to this to say, step up and step in those seasons, because it's already emotionally so hard on moms to birth another human. But definitely go to counseling and find out what you can do to move forward with this, because you don't want this to be the rest of your life.
Right.
And when we say that counseling would be the best option, we are going to recommend that he sees specifically a certified sex addiction therapist, also known as a CSAT, because those types of counselors and therapists, they are specifically trained in things that have to do with sexual addiction, but also on the other end of sexual anorexia. And so I'm assuming when she says physically not attracted, that's also kind of meaning like sexually not attractive, to him. And so I would want him to see a therapist that knows how to kind of get in there and figure out what's going on to make him feel like he's not sexually attracted to her anymore.
And so also, she does say here that he's been in recovery from porn addiction for about 6 years, but I don't know. It doesn't say whether or not he's been in a 7 Pillars group or something. And so this might be a really great opportunity for him to get into 7 Pillars, for her to get into Betrayal and Beyond, and for them to work together on their relationship in their own respective groups.
Yes, absolutely. And then she'll have the support too, because other women have experienced this.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining the conversation today. And remember that we're a listener-driven show, so please send your questions in to unfiltered@puredesire.org. And if you found this episode helpful, share it with a friend.